Hey guys, it's Purple Ferret here. I decided that for one of my stories that I really like a lot, I wanted to try drawing some family photos for it. And so this is the first one of me doing that. And in order to explain bunny ears and stuff, I will have to explain some things, which will take some time. But I'm not going to explain the whole story because I would like to save that for plot relevant scenes I draw. I'm basically just going to be talking main premise of the story and talking about this family's dynamic. I also want to talk a little bit about what inspired this story in the first place because I've had this floating around in my head since freshman year of high school. So whenever I was in 8th grade, my last year of middle school, I was drawing animal hybrids and I was just mixing animals I thought looked interesting together, but they were strictly animals. And then I got to high school and I met one of my best friends who I write this story with, and they said, what if we made human designs for them just for fun? And so we did that. The first character we did this for was Harry, this little buddy guy, and he was a bunny and a dog mixed together. We hadn't decided what kind of dog because the design of the hybrid animal leaned very bunny, and so his human design also leans very bunny, but it's mainly just because his tail is small. He's a border collie and a rabbit, and border collies don't have small tails. It's just happens to be a small tail for whatever reason. And I don't say that because I don't know the reason, because externally it's for plot reasons. In the story, we're not sure why. It's just genetically it was small. He also has bunny feet. They're not really present in this piece or in the lineup art that you saw. So it's not super obvious he has bunny feet under those boots, but he got bunny feet. Now you might be wondering if he's two animals in one, why are his parents human? Well, here's the thing. He's adopted, and he specifically has to hide the fact that he is a hybrid animal person from the world because he was actually created in a lab, and that guy you see in the corner there, he actually saved Harry from the lab and was all like, hey, raise this child. And they're like, I don't know, bro. It's gonna be kind of hard to, hide those ears. And he's like, don't worry, you'll think of something. They live on a farm, so it's not too hard to hide the fact that he has ears because he's homeschooled. He doesn't go into town very much. Their relatives don't visit at any point ever, unless I decide to make them visit, in which case I would probably make them know, but there's not enough room in the story for them to visit, so relatives don't visit, so they don't really know about him. People in town don't really know that anything's off about him either. He has a hoodie that has bunny ears on it, and they just have him slot his ears into that and be like, keep them still, please. And he does. And he has rabbit feet, and luckily rabbits have plantigrade feet like we do, so he can wear regular shoes without having to look all funky walking. He can just walk like a normal person. Some other characters have digitigrade legs, so they're not so lucky in that department. But they also have way more noticeable animal features, so they don't go in public. But that's a very much later in the story thing. We are specifically focusing on his childhood, where he didn't even know there were other people like him. He understood the concept that he was made in a lab and stuff, but he was not aware that there were more like him because that was deliberately kept from him as a child because they didn't want him to feel responsible for making it out and them being trapped there when he wasn't the one who escaped on his own terms. He escaped because Steve, the old guy, was trying to save him, and he can't save all of them, at least not in the same way, because the way he saved Harry was very circumstantial, and relied heavily on the assumption that Harry was going to be dead anyway. Despite having to hide several features of himself whenever he's in public, he had a very happy childhood. His parents cared for him well. He got to interact with people outside of his household, even if he couldn't let them get as close as to hang out at his house or him at their house. So his interactions with children his age were very distant, where he would play with them in public and they'd be like, hey, you want to come over to my house for a sleepover? And he's like, I can't. And so he never really got super close with anyone in the town, which is a little lonely, but he understood why, and he didn't blame anyone or hate himself over it. He understood that it was dangerous because there was no one else like him, and that could scare people off and get him taken away from his parents. So he was scared of that happening for most of his life, but he didn't let it bother him really. Honestly, he's so happy-go-lucky it hurts. I love him so much. I just wanted him to be happy because things get less happy later in the story, and he's still a ray of sunshine, but he becomes a lot more serious as time goes on, where he feels like he has to make tough decisions, and he feels like he can't afford to be as fun-loving as he used to. But he's still very positive in not so serious moments, but in regular, oh no, things are not looking too good type moments, he's very much more serious, and I don't want him to have to do that too early, so he's going to be happy. What's so funny is a lot of the events that cause him to become more serious haven't even been conceived of in my mind. I just know it happens because of later interactions I've written with other characters where I decided things that would be out of character for the beginning of the story version of Harry, but it makes sense with the dynamic the characters have at that point. I basically reverse engineered character development by deciding where he was going to end up and deciding what changed him after, which isn't necessarily the wrong way to write character development. I honestly might consider it one of the best ways to write it because that's kind of how you write a story, is you decide how it's going to end so you can fill in the in-between and make it make sense. So planning for him to go from point A to point B makes it so it's easier to write the character development. But it also is kind of a thing that can happen naturally through scenes where you're like, hey, wait a minute, this would have an effect on this character. Maybe they should act differently after this. So that's a thing that has happened while writing for a lot of things. This one, because he was based off of a bunny dog thing, I made him happy-go-lucky. And after bunny dog thing got turned into a person, I decided that he had to be like the leader of their group at some point, and the leader of their group needs to be a little bit less happy-go-lucky, so he needed to change a little bit, especially since I didn't want him to always be this super serious guy, because that's just not how I envisioned him at any point. He's really only serious about safety. If there is a safety concern, he's going to be the most serious person in the room. But if there's nothing to be actively worried about, he's going to be so chill. It's honestly very unfortunate that I'm not telling you more about the story than I am planning on, because there's so much left in this video that would fill up very quickly if I told you even a fourth of what I knew. There's some info I can give you that's not super spoilery. It's like the equivalent of being in the very first episode. I already mentioned that Harry was saved by the old guy. His name is Steve, and he was going to be presumed dead after whatever was supposed to happen to him. So that's how Harry gets out, and you already knew that. What you didn't know was he barely knew the people that he dropped Harry off, barely knowing these people. They had zero connection aside from one evening. they helped him out and said, if you ever need anything else, let us know. And he took that and ran with it. Honestly, Steve and this married couple were all equally surprised that they said yes and took him in. Now, I haven't given them first names, but they do have a last name, and it is Foster, and they own a farm. So the story is called Foster Farm, and I like alliterative names, and it's very fitting considering what happens later. You might be able to guess what happens later, but I don't really want to tell you what happens later, so you're going to be left in the dark on that front. Sorry. This piece actually took me quite a while. It wasn't even very difficult for me to do. I was kind of surprised that it took me this long to do. It took me 4 hours and 15 minutes, and considering the last one took me like 2 hours, that's a lot different. Honestly, it's just way easier to draw one character just standing there looking cool versus 3 very distinct characters that have to be on model, because I had recently redesigned Ebony, the last video, so I got to pick the colors I was using as I was drawing. I also didn't have to keep on model because I had redesigned her on paper and was kind of making it up as I went. So how she ended up is how she's probably going to stay, but she doesn't have to adhere to a scale relative to other characters. Like, I had to use their character lineups to make sure that they looked right. I also drew them sitting and kneeling in Harry's case, so slightly more difficult poses. His was really easy, especially since I didn't bother putting his legs in there because I felt like trying to draw his feet would look funky. So I really just opted for easy pose for Harry, and then drawing characters sitting is a little bit more difficult than standing because you have to account for how their body changes when they're sitting. You have to account for foreshortening with their thighs and how it folds in front of their torso so that they don't look awkward. And I think I did okay with that. It's not perfect, but I'm not too mad about it. Something I am mad about is how small I made the plaid pattern on the shirt. In the sketch it was a good size, but whenever I got to the final thing, I just messed it up completely. And I insisted on doing this by hand and correctly by having it form to the ways the fabric is folded and stuff. So I did this to myself. I didn't make the pattern large enough, and it's going to be near impossible to fix, so I'm not fixing it. I also chose to do a piece with one of the only characters I have that wears plaid. I have 2 characters that wear plaid every day. One of them is a ghost, and one of them is a dad, and I chose the dad. Recording the voiceover for this is taking longer than I thought it would because I made the assumption that I was going to have enough to talk about to fill the space, but I was wrong. I chose to limit myself for whatever reason, and now I'm just talking about whatever. Well, I guess now I can talk about what I'm about to do, which is I'm about to realize that I messed up on the dad's hair, because this isn't just a family photo that's a family photo. This is a family photo that is intentionally an in-universe family photo where they have this on display in their house, but they obviously can't display it if Harry's bunny ears are visible. So here I am creating the version without it and also cleaning up the version with it. I'm using an erase layer on the color layer and on the line art layer to make it so his ears disappear magically. And in universe, they used Photoshop or something to do that. Overall, I think it really turned out good, except for the plaid on the shirt, which I think looks better in the sketch. I could technically fix it, and it would take a while, so I'm just choosing not to. If it bothers me enough one day, I might fix it, but I am willing to live with how it looks. Now though, Here is also the version of Harry without his ears, which is very weird for me to look at. I can't see him without his ears, and so seeing him without his ears feels wrong. It's a large piece of his body that's just gone, and it feels weird. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this one, even more so than usual, because I really love this story. And I hope you'll come back for the next one, and I'll see you next time. Bye!